Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the human battleship Resolve *, watching the stars through the observation window. The battle had been fierce. 3 hours of weapons fire, explosions, and death. Now, only silence remained. The debris of destroyed ships floated through space like a graveyard of metal and ambition. "Status report," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. Lieutenant Hayes checked his console, his fingers moving quickly over the glowing display. "Enemy fleet destroyed, Commander. We lost the Fearless and the Hammer *. 4 other ships have heavy damage, but we won." Sarah nodded slowly. The Vorthan Empire had attacked without warning. Their ships had appeared near the colony world of New Eden, ready to burn everything to ash. The human fleet had responded with everything they had. It had been a desperate fight, and victory had come at a terrible price. "And the enemy survivors?" Sarah asked. Hayes looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, avoiding her eyes for a moment. "Sensors show several escape pods and damaged ships floating in the debris field. Maybe 200 Vorthan soldiers still alive out there. Most are wounded, some critically." Captain Marcus Webb, Sarah's second-in-command, stepped forward. His face was hard, scarred from years of battle against the Vorthans. "Commander, we should leave them. The Vorthans would never rescue human survivors. They see us as insects, less than insects. They have made that clear many times." Sarah turned to face him. Marcus was a good officer. He had fought beside her in many battles. His tactical mind had saved their fleet more than once. But sometimes his hatred for the enemy clouded his thinking. She understood that hatred. She had felt it herself many times. "How long until their rescue ships arrive?" she asked. "At least 6 hours, Hayes reported. "Their nearest base is far from here. They probably haven't even received the distress signals yet." 6 hours. In the cold vacuum of space, with damaged life support systems and wounded soldiers, 6 hours was a death sentence. Most of those escape pods would become tombs long before help arrived. "Begin rescue operations," Sarah ordered. The bridge went silent. Every officer turned to look at her. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the ship's engines and the soft beeping of various consoles. "Commander," Marcus asked, his voice tight with disbelief. "These are Vorthans. They have killed thousands of our people. They bombed the colony on Sigma Prime last month. Children died in those attacks. Entire families were wiped out." "I know what they did," Sarah said quietly. "I remember every name on that memorial wall. I have visited those graves. I have held the hands of parents who lost their children. But those are wounded soldiers floating in space, not the generals who gave those orders, not the politicians who started this war." "They would let us die," Marcus insisted. "If our positions were reversed, they would watch us suffocate in our escape pods and laugh." "Then they would be wrong," Sarah replied. "And I will not follow their example. We rescue them. We treat their wounded. We act like humans." Marcus wanted to argue more. Sarah could see it in his eyes, the struggle between his duty to obey and his desire to resist. But he was a soldier, and she was his commander. He nodded stiffly and turned to give orders. Within minutes, shuttle craft launched from the Resolve and the other human ships. Medical teams prepared for incoming casualties. The ship's doctors wondered what Vorthan biology would require, but they studied quickly and prepared as best they could, reviewing databases and consulting with xenobiologists via emergency channels. The first rescue shuttle returned 30 minutes later. Sarah went down to the medical bay to see for herself. She needed to know that her orders were being followed, and she needed to be there when the enemy soldiers arrived. The Vorthans were tall creatures, almost 8 feet in height, with gray skin and 4 arms. Their faces were flat, with small black eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. They had evolved as predators on a harsh world, and everything about them looked dangerous. Even their hands ended in sharp claws that could tear through metal. The wounded ones did not look dangerous now. They looked afraid. They looked like any wounded soldiers, regardless of species, facing death far from home. A young Vorthan soldier lay on a medical bed, purple blood leaking from a wound in his chest. The human doctors worked quickly, using tools they had adapted for alien anatomy. The Vorthan's eyes were wide with terror as the humans surrounded him. He tried to speak, but only a wet gurgling sound came from his throat. "Do not fear," Sarah said, stepping closer. "We are here to help you." The Vorthan stared at her. His translator device crackled, damaged in the battle, but still working well enough to convey meaning. "Help," he repeated, his voice rough and confused. "You are human. Humans are our enemy. Why would you help me?" "Today you are wounded," Sarah said simply. "Tomorrow you might be my enemy again. But right now you need medical care and we can provide it. That is enough reason." The Vorthan did not seem to understand. He kept watching the doctors with fear, waiting for them to hurt him instead of heal him. His 4 arms tensed, ready to fight despite his weakness. "Rest," Sarah told him. "You are safe here." More shuttles arrived. More wounded Vorthans filled the medical bay. Some were unconscious, their bodies broken by the violence of battle. Some screamed in pain as the doctors worked to save them. A few tried to fight, their warrior instincts making them lash out at the humans nearby. The human soldiers did not fight back. They restrained the violent ones gently, holding them still until the doctors could sedate them. No one struck a wounded enemy. No one took revenge for the battles they had fought. It was not easy. Sarah saw the anger in their eyes, the desire for payback, but they followed their orders. Among the rescued was a Vorthan officer. His uniform showed the marks of high rank, though his body showed the marks of serious injury. Half of one arm was missing, torn away by an explosion. Burns covered his face and chest. He had been found in the wreckage of a command ship, barely alive. "This one is important," Marcus said, standing beside Sarah. "An officer of this rank might have valuable intelligence. We should interrogate him. Find out what he knows about enemy positions, fleet movements, future attacks." "After he receives medical care," Sarah said. "Not before." "Commander." "The answer is no, Captain Webb. He gets treatment first. All of them do. We can discuss intelligence later when they are stable and strong enough to talk." The Vorthan officer was conscious, though barely. His dark eyes found Sarah's face and held there. He seemed to be studying her, trying to understand what he was seeing. "Why?" he whispered through his translator. "Why do you save us? There is no logic in this, no advantage." Sarah thought about the question. It was a fair one. The Vorthans had been at war with humanity for 5 years. They had burned colonies, destroyed ships, killed soldiers and civilians alike. They believed humans were a lesser species, unworthy of the stars. They had said so many times in their broadcasts and communications. "Because it is right," Sarah answered finally. "Because we are more than the enemy you think we are. Because leaving you to die would make us no better than those who ordered the attack on Sigma Prime." The officer stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been confusion or surprise. Then his eyes closed and he slipped into unconsciousness. The rescue operations continued for hours. Every Vorthan survivor was brought aboard, treated, and secured in comfortable holding areas. The human doctors worked without rest, learning Vorthan medicine as they went, saving lives that most of their comrades thought should be left to fate. Some of the human crew grumbled. Some refused to help and had to be reassigned to other duties. Sarah understood their anger. She felt it herself when she looked at the wounded enemies and remembered all the friends she had lost to Vorthan weapons. But she did not change her orders. "We define ourselves by our actions," she told them, "not by the actions of our enemies. If we become like them, then what are we fighting for?" By the time the Vorthan rescue fleet finally arrived, all survivors had been stabilized. 217 soldiers who should have died were now alive and recovering. The human ships remained in place, making no move to attack or retreat. "Commander," Hayes reported, his voice nervous, "the Vorthan fleet is hailing us. They're demanding to know why we haven't left. They seem confused." "Open a channel," Sarah said. She straightened her uniform and faced the main screen. The face that appeared was a senior Vorthan commander, older and scarred from many battles. His expression was cold, but beneath the coldness, Sarah saw confusion. He had expected to find floating corpses, not living soldiers aboard enemy ships. "Human," he said, his voice a low growl through the translator. "Explain your presence here. Explain why you have not fled or attacked." "We rescued your wounded soldiers," Sarah said calmly. 217 of them. They are ready for transfer to your custody." The Vorthan commander stared at her. For a long moment he said nothing. His 4 arms hung at his sides, motionless, as if he had forgotten how to move. "You rescued them?" he finally asked. "Yes." "Why?" It was the same question the wounded officer had asked. Sarah gave the same answer. "Because it is right." The Vorthan commander's expression shifted. He had expected many things from humans. He had expected violence, deception, cowardice, or aggression. He had not expected compassion. "We will accept the transfer of prisoners," he said slowly. "This is unexpected, unprecedented." "They are not prisoners," Sarah corrected. "They are wounded soldiers returning to their people. We took nothing from them. We questioned none of them. We simply saved their lives." The transfer took another 2 hours. Vorthan medical ships approached slowly, cautiously, as if expecting a trap. There was no trap. Human shuttles carried the wounded across space and delivered them safely to their own kind. Each transfer was documented and recorded, transparent and honest. When the last shuttle returned, Sarah watched the Vorthan fleet on her screen. They made no move to attack. They simply waited as if unsure what to do next. The moment stretched out, filled with uncertainty and possibility. Finally, the old Vorthan commander appeared on screen again. "Human," he said, and his voice was different now. Less hostile, more thoughtful, almost respectful. "I do not understand your people. You fight like demons in battle, then show mercy to those you defeat. This makes no sense to me." "Perhaps one day it will," Sarah said. "Safe travels, Commander." She cut the channel before he could respond. The Vorthan fleet slowly turned and departed, leaving the battlefield behind. Their ships disappeared into the darkness of space, carrying their wounded home. Marcus stood beside her, watching them go. "They'll be back," he said. "They'll attack us again. This changed nothing." "Maybe," Sarah admitted. "Or maybe it changed everything. We'll see." The Resolve turned toward home, carrying its weary crew back to human space. Behind them, 200 Vorthan soldiers lived to see another day, because a human commander had refused to let them die. News of the rescue spread quickly through both human and Vorthan space. Some humans called Commander Chen foolish. Others called her weak. Politicians debated whether she should be praised or punished. But many more saw something different in her actions, something that reminded them why they were fighting in the first place. They were fighting to protect their way of life, and their way of life included mercy. 3 months passed. The war continued, but something had shifted. Vorthan attacks became less brutal. Human colonies reported fewer civilian casualties. The violence remained, but the savagery had dimmed. Something had changed in the hearts of those who fought. Commander Sarah Chen noticed these changes but said nothing. She continued her duties, patrolling human space, protecting the colonies that depended on her. She did not expect recognition or reward for what she had done at New Eden. She had simply done what she believed was right. What she received instead was an invitation. "A diplomatic summit?" Marcus asked, reading the message on his datapad. "The Vorthans want to negotiate, after 5 years of war." So it appears, Sarah said. The Galactic Council has offered neutral space. Both sides have agreed to send representatives. And they've specifically requested you, Marcus added, looking at her with surprise. The Vorthan ambassador asked for Commander Sarah Chen by name. They won't negotiate unless you're present. This was unusual. Military officers did not typically attend diplomatic functions. Politicians and professional negotiators handled such things. Soldiers fought and died. Diplomats talked and compromised. The two worlds rarely mixed. What do you think they want? Marcus asked. I don't know, Sarah admitted, but I intend to find out. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Galactic Council station, watching ships arrive from a dozen different species. The station was neutral territory, a place where enemies could meet without weapons. Here, the laws of all civilizations were suspended in favor of peaceful discussion. The Vorthan delegation arrived in a massive warship that dwarfed the human vessels. Its weapons were powered down, as required by Council law, but its size still sent a clear message about Vorthan power. They wanted everyone to know that they came from strength, not weakness. Sarah watched the Vorthan shuttle dock with the station. She wore her formal uniform, medals gleaming on her chest, though she felt out of place among the diplomats and politicians who filled the halls. She was a soldier, not a negotiator. She wondered why the Vorthans had asked for her specifically. Ambassador James Wright, the human representative, approached her. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, worn down by years of failed peace attempts. Commander Chen, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. Your presence here is highly irregular, but the Vorthans were insistent. They would not proceed without you. Do you know why they asked for me specifically? Sarah asked. They haven't said, but I suspect it has something to do with the incident at New Eden. Wright smiled slightly. Your rescue of those soldiers made quite an impression, it seems. Word has spread throughout Vorthan space. The diplomatic sessions began the next morning. Sarah sat at the human table, behind the ambassador and his team. Across the room, the Vorthan delegation occupied their own section, their tall forms towering over the smaller species present. For hours they discussed trade routes, border disputes, and prisoner exchanges. The conversation was formal, cold, and ultimately unproductive. Neither side was willing to give ground. Old grievances were repeated. Old accusations were made. It seemed like every other failed peace conference. Then the Vorthan ambassador rose to speak. Before we continue, he said, his translator rendering his words in a flat, mechanical tone, I wish to address a matter of personal importance. The room fell silent. The other species watched with curiosity. This was unusual protocol. 3 months ago, the ambassador continued, a battle took place near the human colony of New Eden. The Vorthan fleet was destroyed. 200 of our soldiers survived the battle, wounded and stranded in space. Sarah felt the attention of the room shift toward her. People were staring, whispering. These soldiers should have died, the ambassador said. Without rescue, they would have perished long before our ships could reach them. By all logic, by all expectation, they should have been left to their fate. That is what we would have done to human survivors. That is what we expected you to do to ours. The room was completely still now. No one moved, no one spoke. But they did not die. They were rescued by their enemies. The ambassador turned to face Sarah directly. His dark eyes locked onto hers. Commander Sarah Chen ordered her fleet to save Vorthan lives, despite having every reason to leave them to their fate. She provided medical care, comfort, and dignity to those who had tried to kill her and her people. When our fleet arrived, she returned our soldiers without condition or demand. No ransom, no interrogation, no demands. I was one of those soldiers, the ambassador said. Sarah's eyes widened. She looked more closely at the Vorthan and recognized him. The burns on his face had healed, but the scars remained. His left arm ended at the elbow, where a prosthetic now replaced the limb torn away by explosion. He was the officer she had found among the wounded, the one who had asked her why. "I was the officer you found among the wounded," he continued. "I asked you why you saved us. You said it was because it was right. I did not understand your words then. They seemed like weakness, like foolishness. I have thought about them every day since." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried emotion that the translator struggled to convey. "Among my people, strength is everything. We respect power, fear weakness, and despise mercy. For generations, we believed that compassion was a failure, that kindness made us vulnerable. We saw humans as soft creatures, easily conquered, unworthy of the stars. We were wrong." The words hung in the air. Several Vorthan delegates shifted uncomfortably, but no one interrupted. What Commander Chen did was not weakness. It was the greatest strength I have ever witnessed. She could have let us die. She could have taken revenge for our attacks on human colonies. Instead, she chose to save lives, even the lives of those who would never have done the same for her. "That," the ambassador said, "is a strength my people must learn to understand." He turned back to the assembled delegates. "I am here today because I survived. I am here because a human commander showed me that there is more to strength than violence, more to honor than victory. I am here to propose peace between our peoples." The human delegation sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Wright looked at Sarah with wide eyes. Even Marcus, watching from a secure room aboard the human ship, had nothing to say. "Peace requires trust," the Vorthan ambassador continued. "Trust must be earned through action, not words. Commander Chen has shown through her actions that humans can be trusted to act with honor, even toward their enemies. I propose that we begin peace negotiations immediately, with Commander Chen as the human representative." Ambassador Wright started to object that this was not proper protocol, that he was the official diplomatic representative, but Sarah spoke first. "I would be honored," she said, rising from her seat. The Vorthan ambassador nodded. For the first time, something like respect appeared in his eyes. "Then let us begin," he said. "Let us build a peace worthy of your mercy." The negotiations lasted for 6 weeks. They were difficult, frustrating, and often seemed doomed to failure. Centuries of hatred could not be erased by a single act of kindness. Both sides had grievances, demands, and fears that needed to be addressed. There were moments when everything seemed ready to collapse. But Sarah was patient. She listened when the Vorthans spoke of their concerns. She explained human fears without anger or accusation. She found common ground where others saw only division. She treated her former enemies with the same respect she would show allies. The Vorthan ambassador, whose name was Thuron, became her constant partner in these discussions. He had once been a warrior who dreamed of conquering human space. Now, he worked beside a human commander to end the war he had once fought to win. "You have changed me," he told her one evening, as they reviewed documents in a private room. "I do not know if my people are ready for this change, but I know that I am." "Change comes slowly," Sarah said, "but it comes. Your people will see the benefits of peace in time." "Perhaps," Thuron agreed. "Or perhaps they will see me as a traitor who surrendered to the enemy. Either way, I believe this is right. You taught me that sometimes right is more important than strong." On the 43rd day of negotiations, a peace agreement was reached. It was not perfect. Both sides made compromises that angered their own people, but it was a beginning. It was a foundation upon which something greater could be built. When Sarah returned to the *Resolve*, she found a message waiting from Admiral Harrison, commander of the human fleet. "Commander Chen," the message began, "you have accomplished what our politicians could not. Peace with the Vorthans seemed impossible until your actions made it achievable. You will receive a promotion to Admiral, effective immediately, and command of the Third Fleet." Sarah read the message twice, then set it aside. The promotion was welcome, but it was not why she had done what she did. She had done it because it was right. And that, in the end, was what made humanity special. Not their weapons, their technology, or their fleet, but their ability to show mercy to those who expected none. 5 years later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Unity Asterisk. Outside the observation window, human and Vorthan ships flew in formation together for the first time in history. The sight would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. The alliance had been difficult to build. Many on both sides resisted the idea of working with former enemies. Battles had been fought, not between humans and Vorthans, but within their own societies, as old hatreds struggled against new understanding. Politicians had been voted out of office. Military leaders had resigned in protest, but the peace had held. Trade routes now connected human and Vorthan space. Cultural exchanges brought visitors from both species to learn about each other. Children grew up in a galaxy where the war was history, not reality. Schools taught the story of New Eden as an example of how enemies could become friends. And now both species faced a common threat. Admiral, her tactical officer, reported, "The Kreth Armada is approaching. Estimated arrival in 3 hours." The Kreth were a species from the galaxy's outer rim, ancient and powerful. They had watched the younger races with disdain for millennia, but had never acted against them. Their technology was superior, their numbers vast, their experience in war unmatched. Until now, they had been content to observe. Their message had been simple and terrifying: submit or be destroyed. Neither humans nor Vorthans were willing to submit. "Signal the Vorthan fleet," Sarah ordered. "Confirm they are ready." "Confirmed, Admiral. High Commander Thuron sends his regards and asks if you remember how to win a battle." Sarah smiled. Thuron had risen through the ranks since the peace, becoming one of the highest-ranking officers in the Vorthan military. Their friendship had grown over the years, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They had trained together, planned together, and now they would fight together. "Tell him I remember well enough," she replied, "and remind him that victory means more than just winning." The Kreth fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel with a flash of light that filled the screen. Thousands of ships, each one larger and more advanced than anything humans or Vorthans had built. They stretched across space like a wall of metal and fire. "That's a lot of ships," Marcus said. He was still at her side, now her chief advisor. "Are you sure about this?" "No," Sarah admitted, "but we're going to try anyway." The battle began with weapons fire that lit up the darkness of space. Human and Vorthan ships attacked together, their tactics coordinated, their strategies unified. They had spent 5 years learning to work together, and now that training was being tested in the most important battle either species had ever faced. The Kreth fought with terrible efficiency. Their weapons cut through shields like paper. Their ships moved with precision that seemed almost mechanical. Within the first hour, dozens of Allied vessels had been destroyed. The losses were mounting. But the Allied forces did not retreat. "Focus fire on the command ships," Sarah ordered. "If we can disrupt their coordination, we can create openings." Human and Vorthan weapons hit the same targets simultaneously. The Kreth command ship shuddered under the assault, its shields flickering. Then it exploded, taking several smaller ships with it. "One down," Marcus reported. "Several hundred to go." The battle raged for hours. Ships died on both sides. Heroes emerged and fell. The Allied fleet was pushed back, reformed, and pushed back again. It seemed like the Kreth were unstoppable, their numbers too great to overcome. Then the Kreth made a mistake. Their formation opened slightly as they pressed their advantage, confident in their superiority. Sarah saw the gap and immediately recognized the opportunity. It was a risk, but she had not come this far by being cautious. All ships attack Pattern Omega, target that opening. The Allied fleet surged forward. Human aggression combined with Vorthan strength in a devastating assault that tore through the Kreth lines. The enemy formation shattered, and suddenly, the battle shifted. "They're breaking," a tactical officer shouted. It was true. The Kreth ships were falling back, unable to maintain cohesion. For the first time in the battle, they looked uncertain. They had never faced an enemy that could match their coordination, their determination. "Press the attack," Sarah ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup." The Allied fleet pursued, and the Kreth retreat became a rout. By the time the enemy fled into faster-than-light travel, they had lost nearly half their armada. The ancient, undefeated Kreth had been beaten. The Allied fleet had suffered heavily too. Nearly a third of their ships were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Thousands of lives had been lost, but they had won. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "the Kreth are transmitting. They're requesting negotiation." Sarah nodded slowly. The Kreth had never negotiated with anyone. They had always believed themselves too powerful to need diplomacy. They had conquered or destroyed. They had never talked. Today, they had learned otherwise. "Accept their request," she said. "Tell them we're willing to talk." Marcus looked at her with something like wonder. "You're going to negotiate with them after what they did?" "Of course," Sarah said. "We fought them because we had to. Now that they're willing to talk, we should listen. They killed thousands of our people. And we killed thousands of theirs. If we let hatred guide us now, the war will never end. We have to be willing to move beyond revenge if we want real peace." It was the same lesson she had taught through her actions 5 years ago when she rescued wounded Vorthans from the debris of battle. Mercy was not weakness. Compassion was not surrender. True strength lay in the ability to end conflicts, not just win them. The negotiations with the Kreth took months. They were proud, ancient, and deeply suspicious of the younger races who had defeated them. But slowly understanding grew. Trust developed, fragile at first, then stronger. Sarah learned that the Kreth had attacked because they feared the alliance between humans and Vorthans. They had watched the two species, once bitter enemies, become partners. They worried that this alliance would eventually threaten their own power, their ancient dominance. "You feared us," Sarah said to the Kreth ambassador during one session, "because we learned to stop fighting each other." "Your unity is dangerous," the ambassador agreed. "Separately, you were no threat. Together, you are powerful. This concerned us greatly." "Then join us," Sarah offered. "Don't fight against our alliance, become part of it." The Kreth ambassador was silent for a long moment. His ancient eyes studied her face. "You defeated us in battle," he said finally. "By the laws of our people, we are now your subjects. Yet you offer us partnership instead of submission." "Yes. Why?" Sarah smiled. It was the same question she had answered so many times before. "Because it is right. Because lasting peace cannot be built on conquest. Because the galaxy is large enough for all of us if we choose to share it." The Kreth joined the alliance the following year. Their technology and knowledge strengthened the partnership between species. Their ancient wisdom helped guide the younger races through challenges they could not have faced alone. And at the center of it all stood Admiral Sarah Chen, the human commander who had shown the galaxy that strength and mercy could exist together. Decades passed. Admiral Chen became Ambassador Chen, then Elder Chen, as she transitioned from military service to diplomatic leadership. She watched generations grow up in a galaxy transformed by the peace she had helped create. Human children studied alongside Vorthan and Kreth students in schools that would have been unimaginable during the wars. Trade and culture flowed freely between species that had once tried to destroy each other. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was better than it had been. Conflicts still arose, but they were resolved through discussion, not destruction. On the 50th anniversary of the Battle of New Eden, a ceremony was held in the same space where the fighting had occurred. Ships from every species in the Alliance gathered to remember what had happened and honor those who had made peace possible. Sarah, now old and frail, attended via holographic projection from her home on Earth. Her body could no longer travel, but her mind remained sharp, and her spirit remained strong. She watched the assembled ships with wonder, remembering how different things had been half a century ago. "I am often asked," she said to the assembled crowd, "why I ordered my fleet to rescue Vorthan soldiers that day. People expect a complicated answer, some grand strategy or political calculation." She paused, looking out at the faces watching her. Humans, Vorthans, Kreth, and a dozen other species who had joined the Alliance over the years, all of them united by the peace she had helped create. "The truth is simple. I saw wounded beings who needed help. I had the ability to provide that help, so I did. That is what humanity means to me. Not conquest, not dominance, not the power to destroy, but the power to choose kindness when cruelty would be easier, the strength to show mercy when revenge would feel better, the wisdom to know that how we treat our enemies defines us more than how we treat our friends." Ambassador Thuron, also old now, spoke next. His voice was deeper than it had been, roughened by age, but his words carried the same weight they had carried decades ago. "When I asked Commander Chen why she saved us, she said it was because it was right. I did not understand those words then. I thought rightness was determined by strength, that the powerful defined what was good and what was evil. I was wrong. Rightness comes from within. It is a choice we make, regardless of power or circumstance. The humans taught us this. One commander, one decision, one moment of mercy that changed everything. Today, we celebrate not just peace, but the idea that peace is possible. We celebrate the belief that enemies can become friends, that hatred can become understanding, that the future does not have to repeat the past. We celebrate humanity, not the species but the ideal, the dream of a galaxy where strength and compassion walk together. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for all those who had died in the wars and battles that had preceded the peace. Then, slowly, the ships began to disperse, returning to their duties across the galaxy. Sarah watched them go from her home, surrounded by family and friends who had come to celebrate with her. Her life's work was complete. The peace she had planted with a single act of mercy had grown into something vast and beautiful. That night, as she prepared for sleep, her great-granddaughter came to her room. The child was young, with curious eyes and endless questions. "Great-grandmother," the child asked, "will I ever have to fight in a war?" Sarah looked at the young face, so full of hope and innocence. She remembered when she had been that young, before the wars, before the battles, before she had learned what it meant to kill and to save. "I hope not," she said. "That is why we worked so hard to build peace, so that children like you would never have to know what we knew. But what if there is a war someday? What should I do?" Sarah thought about the question. She remembered the battles, the fear, the hatred that had consumed so many years of her life. She remembered the moment when she had looked at wounded enemies and seen not monsters, but beings who needed help. "Fight if you must," she said finally. "Defend what you believe in. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Be brave when bravery is needed. But never forget that your enemy is also a living being, with fears and hopes and family waiting at home. And if you win," she continued, "remember that victory is not the end. The hardest work comes after the fighting stops. Building peace is harder than winning wars. Showing mercy takes more courage than showing strength." "Be strong," Sarah said, holding her great-granddaughter's hands. "Be brave, but most of all be kind. That is what humanity means. That is our gift to the galaxy." She passed away peacefully 3 months later, surrounded by those who loved her. Her death was mourned across the galaxy by billions of beings from dozens of species. They remembered her not as a warrior or a commander, but as the woman who had shown them that compassion could change the universe. Monuments were built in her honor on every world in the Alliance. Schools bore her name. Her story was taught to children of every species as an example of what was possible when one person chose to do what was right instead of what was easy. But the greatest monument was the peace itself. Year after year, decade after decade, the alliance she had helped create continued to grow and strengthen. Wars became rare, then almost unknown. Species that had once been enemies now called each other friends. The galaxy flourished in ways that had once seemed impossible. And whenever someone asked how this miracle had come to pass, the answer was always the same. It began with one human commander who looked at wounded enemies and saw not threats to be destroyed, but lives to be saved. It began with mercy. It began with humanity. And it spread across the stars, lighting up the darkness of the galaxy with the simple, powerful truth that Sarah Chen had lived by all her life. That doing what is right is always worth the cost. That compassion is the greatest strength. That humanity in its truest sense is not about where you come from, but about what you choose to do.